Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our session with Meath Libraries this morning. It's Canine Conversations with Freda. Freda Gorman is joining us this morning, and she is a groomer extraordinaire, and she's also a veterinary nurse based in the Trim area. So let's get this conversation started. Freda, you're very welcome this morning. Probably the most obvious thing this morning is we have always been a nation of animal lovers, as you know, particularly dogs and cats and whatever. But with the COVID of the last year, you see a huge rise in the number of people who are owning dogs and cats. So really this morning, I was thinking we might talk about what you need to consider when you are deciding whether a pet is for you and what kind of pet is for you. So would you like to take it from there?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Amanda. Lovely to be invited. Yes, the COVID situation has definitely changed people's approach to dogs. And I'd imagine that I'm going to say mostly families, although it probably applies to single people as well. But families who maybe have been thinking about getting a dog, I almost said threatening to get a dog, but promising to get a dog, promised the children a dog, and the time was just never right. And then suddenly we're at home more. We're not going abroad on holidays this year. We're walking every day, maybe twice a day. And it's not only that, but maybe we need something new in the house just to soften the atmosphere a bit, just to make, just to sometimes use a bit of a distraction if things are getting a bit tense, and there's nothing better than a pet for that situation. So I think people just started thinking that maybe it was a good time to get a pet. And then, of course, things snowballed from that. There's various different ways of getting pets. I'd love to say rescues are the first, but they're not actually the first protocol for the majority of people. The majority of people would go on to the internet and start looking at dog selling sites. Now, a done deal was the huge one, but they're not actually selling animals anymore, but it's been replaced by a myriad of other ones. All sorts of pages purely devoted to selling pets. And then, of course, the rescues, they're not actually like in competition to that. They would hope that a rescue would be your first choice, but it's not always. So it depends what sort of a dog you want. You can get all sorts of dogs in rescues. You can get all sorts of dogs from breeders. There are various kinds of breeders. There are the backyard breeders, the registered breeders, the puppy farmers. And then you have all the different rescues. You have the pounds, you have the private rescues. Some rescues get government funding. Some rescues take dogs from pounds. Some rescues don't actually hold dogs at all. They just foster and rehome from the situation the dog is in to another situation. And we actually have one of those in Trim, the Last Hope. They don't keep dogs in their care, but they are aware of lots of dogs and cats needing homes. So I think that's really, it was a time element of people's lives that spurred them to dog ownership. Mm-hmm. And you do see an awful lot of puppies around Trim at the moment, now around everywhere, obviously, but I'm only around Trim, as we all are at the moment. And I think a lot of people, they possibly made the right decision, and it takes, takes a while to get on board with a new puppy in the house, but time is so important. And if you're there during the day, obviously that's a great start for the pup. Now, there'll be a lot more conversation about things when we all go back to work. But, maybe everybody won't go back to work full time. Maybe the commuting won't be as heavy. Maybe people will work from home a couple of days a week. So that's all in a puppy's interest.
Mm-hmm. It's really, I think most people are a little bit bewildered as to how to, once they decide, yes, okay, they've thought about all of these things, they thought, yes, we can give a dog a lovely home and whatever, and what the pet is. Where do you think they should start looking, Freda?
Okay, well, that's actually, how long is a piece of string? Because most people, a lot of people want a puppy, which is fine, especially if you've got small children. There's a lot to be said for a puppy. You're going to mold it in your way. It's not going to be snappy. It doesn't have any behavioral problems because it's only a puppy. Mm-hmm. So it's up to you then to make your stamp on that puppy, and you can make that puppy live the life you want. If you want that puppy, to sit in the backyard for 2 hours, you train it to do that. If you want it to be in the bed, you allow it to do that. So it's completely up to yourself. So a puppy is like a blank canvas. Rescues, sometimes have puppies that don't always, sometimes they get a pregnant bitch surrendered or strayed and nobody claims it. And the puppies will be born there and then they would be rehomed as obviously as puppies. But mostly rescues tend to have dogs that are a little bit older because people have got a dog and then for whatever reason, who knows, personal, it could be outside influences, work, travel, family commitments, they realize the dog is not for them. Or maybe they haven't put the work into the dog that they should, and now the dog's behavior is unacceptable in the home and they really don't know where to go. So sometimes they surrender the dog at that point. When you're giving a dog into rescue, that's called surrendering the dog, because you sign the dog away, basically you're not getting it back.
And would you think, Freda, that perhaps if you were going to take a rescue dog, you should be someone with a little bit of experience with dogs? This wouldn't be your very first paw in the market, if you know what I mean, that you would actually maybe even if you've grown up, you mightn't have a dog, but you might have grown up always with dogs. So you do know a little bit about what's involved. Because obviously there's a little bit of a history that you're not necessarily going to know, which could display after you brought the dog home.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I think so many people you meet when you're out walking dogs who don't have a dog grew up with a dog. Mm-hmm. So most people have had some sort of exposure to a dog, even if it was just a collie that ran around with their father's sheep, or their granny had a German Shepherd or whatever, mm-hmm. And people that are interested in dogs because they look at dogs, they're interested in the whole way dogs are, even if they don't have one. So I think to take a rescue dog, it probably would definitely be an advantage if you had some knowledge of dogs. And I'm not talking about knowledge of the internet. I'm talking about experience with dogs. I mean, you don't have to be a vet or, a dog handler, but just to be relaxed around dogs. Mm-hmm. See, when a dog comes from a home situation and goes to a rescue, the first thing is the rescue, the people who are surrounding the dog, they want the rescue to take the dog. So I'm not going to say they're not truthful, but they're probably not going to say he's completely not toilet trained. He wets the floor every single night. They're not going to say that. They say, we've had a problem with toilet training and he sometimes has accidents. You see the difference in those two statements, I mean, we all do it, So the rescue takes the dog. Now the dog is in a kennel, unless he's fostered out. But mostly they're in a kennel situation. So they're in their super well looked after in the pounds and in the rescues, but it's not like home. So their behavior automatically changes. Well, first of all, they're probably a little bit stressed because they're not really sure what's going on. They're in the company of other dogs, so they might feel a bit intimidated, or they might feel they need to be superior. So it can take a while for their actual personality to come through and for the rescue people to be able to say, right, this dog really needs to go to a home where there are no other dogs. This dog would be very happy with an elderly person or children or whatever, the country, the town. Yeah. So usually the rescue people, between the history of the dog, as much as they can, ascertain, and their experience of the dog. Now, what a lot of rescues do is they foster out a dog. So they would give a dog. I have done fostering in the past. They would give a dog to a family, and then the person that was fostering the dog would have a huge experience with dogs, and they would be able to say after 48 hours, this dog just shouldn't be around children. This dog doesn't like cats or guinea pigs or budgies or whatever. This dog cannot be off the lead. He has no recall or whatever. Mm-hmm. So by fostering, actually, they get a much better handle on what the dog needs.
To do.
Yeah. So I think a rescue, a little bit of experience if you're going to take a rescue, possibly, and also to be a bit open-minded, not to say, oh, I'm getting a pom, because my granny always had a pom and she sat on the window and barked every time a blue car went past. Like you don't have that pom. You have a different pom. You have your own pom. So you can't recreate a dog that's gone. So don't have too many set ideas in your head if you're getting a rescue. That's the first thing I would say.
Okay, so that's picking it from a rescue situation. So what about the little cuddly bundle of fluff that everyone falls in love with and whatever and brings home? And it's tiny and it fits in the palm of your hand and everyone loves it. Okay,
so you're selling it.
I'm selling it. So okay, you bring it home, you bring him or her home, and it goes into a home. Okay, for a start, with no other dogs. This is the first thing. You have small children in the house, maybe 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, that kind of an age group, old enough to know what's going on and take a little bit of responsibility. There's you working from home. Your partner may be working from home. Your husband may be working from home. So here is the dog. What are your, what's your advice, Freda?
Okay, well, I could be here till tomorrow telling about that. I think the first thing is prepare before you get the dog. So, you know, and I don't just mean getting the bed and the bowls and the lead. Obviously, you need to get all those things. But you, and I mean, it doesn't have to be set in stone. But first of all, I don't personally advise that the dog belongs to one family member. So it's not Mammy's dog. It's not Daddy's dog. It's not, none of the children get, it's not your dog or my dog. It's our dog. So it's not like it's a possession. So it's not like, you can't hold him, he's mine. That's not going to happen. So he's not, and he shouldn't be a present, like Christmas, birthday. I don't think that's a good idea. I think there's enough going on at Christmas and birthdays without the arrival of a puppy. Like if you want to get a puppy to mark a special occasion, maybe like your other dog died and it was his birthday today, and you'd like to get another dog on that day. Yes, absolutely. Get the bed, get the collar, get the lead. Maybe even look at pictures of the puppy you're going to get, choose the puppy's name if you want to, or make a list of names. You can get a lot of time out of getting a pup with children. You're getting ready for the pup. But you must always reiterate that the pup is going to be part of the family. He needs his rest. He needs his break. He's not a toy. That is so important. So then I'll talk about how you source the pup in a minute. So you get the pup, you bring the pup home. If you're going to pick the pup before you book him, I would suggest the adults go first on their own. Look at the pups, decide, yeah, you've already sussed out this breeder, you're going to get this pup, you're going to leave a deposit today. So you go, you pick out the brown pup with the red collar, or whatever way the breeder has them. You know, they usually have them labeled in different ways, usually different color collars, whatever. So that's going to be your pup. You have his name, you know, he's ready. So then when you go back to collect the pup, then bring the whole shebang of children or whatever. Because I just think one child will want that pup, and then just for that reason, the other child will want the other pup. Now, any proper breeder won't let a load of children into to maul pups. They'll just pick out the one you're getting. Some breeders will say, oh, this is your pup number 3. So you're not going to say, but we want that one. No, he's gone already. So anyway, you go pick up the pup, bring the children. I would say that Mammy's or Daddy's going to hold, or an adult's going to hold the pup in the car on the way home. Preferably sitting in the back, I think might be nice. But don't forget that this pup is, I mean, his world is falling apart. He had Mammy and possibly Daddy and maybe other dogs. He had his sibling or her siblings. So he's slept every night in a group of 5 or 6 puppies, all curled up together. Mammy's checked him every morning. He's obviously not feeding anymore. He's feeding out of a bowl because he's old enough. But every time he looks around, there's another puppy there waiting to play with you. So suddenly that's all gone. So don't expect that the puppy's going to be absolutely full of life and saying, oh, thank God you took me to a lovely home. He's saying, what's happening here? Where are my family? I don't know you, So that takes not long, because puppies learn really, really fast. So I would say plenty of patience and kindness for the first few days, preferably, and I know I sound like a real witch here when I say this, but preferably not carrying the pup around. Okay, again, is not a toy. So yes, if you want him to go from A to B and he's not getting there, carry him. But a pup needs to be independent. So walking, smelling, sniffing around, finding his feet, and no like shrieking every time he stops or goes into another room or wets the floor or anything. Just keep it low key. Like, you don't want the pup saying every time a door bangs, because that's going to lead to behavioral issues in the future. So keep it calm, keep it slow. Personally, I'm a fan. Also show him pretty early on where his water and food's going to be. You don't carry the bowl around, like no child saying, here's your drink, Teddy, because they're all called Teddy, Bella. They have lovely names now. They look like teddy bears. So Freddie, Teddy, Bella, Elsa, they're all really popular names now, and they really fit the dogs, But anyway, so it's not a child carrying around the food or water, it's the water is there. So if you see him and he's kind of looking a bit uncomfortable, show him his water, show him his food. So we'll go into food in a minute. So basically, an hour or so when he comes home, let him sniff around or whatever. And then I'm a fan of crate training, which is a little It's like a little cage. You're not allowed to call them cages now. They're called crates. It's like a little dog pen. You can get them, and you get them in choice, whatever. Don't get a huge big one. Don't get a teeny one. Think of how big he's going to be in the future. So really, it should be his pen for, well, you can have it for his life, or for, until he's old enough to know the boundaries. Excuse me. Or some people use them in the car when they're transporting, because, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So then when he's all tired and he's been brought out and done his wee, pop him in the crate. Put it in the utility room, not in the kitchen where there's loads of excitement. Put it in the bathroom or the utility room. He's a little blanket in there. He doesn't need food and water in there. Really, he's only going to be in there for maybe an hour, and he'll just spill the food and water. And his cuddly toy, some kind of a little teddy or something that he can lie up against like a little sibling. Yeah. Close the crate, tell him good night or good day, or it's time for your nap. Close the door, off, which is all. Leave him there. Yes, he's not going to lie down and say, thank God. He's going to say, where's everybody gone? Whinge, whinge, cry, cry. You can look back in and say, we're here, like a child in a cot. We're here now. You're fine. You're not on your own. But don't take him out. Just leave him there, and do that 3 or 4 times during the day, even if you only leave him for 20 minutes. I would always recommend putting them in there when you are eating, or else you're going to develop terrible begging habits. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to say what my own dogs do at dinner time, but I do put them outside. So
well, it's unfair on them, really. You see, and I get where you're coming from, because it's coming over that you start as you mean to go on.
That's exactly, man. I know. Sorry, I've gone a long way around that, but that was what I was going to say. The rules you set down at the beginning.
You've got to remember, this dog is going to grow bigger, and he's not, he's going to be in the way when you're trying to cook dinner, or you're trying to get everything on the table. Or when
or Granny comes in with her walking frame.
Yeah, and then it becomes chaotic, and that's obviously not what you want. So the rules are changing for the poor dog. He doesn't understand why. So as you're saying, if you kind of start with calm.
Yes.
And try and keep it as calm as you can.
Yes, and this is the time to make the rules, because once the dog or anybody pick up bad habits, it's very hard to reverse those. Mm-hmm. So if you can set things down, A, B, C, everybody in the house is going by the same rules. So, Mum, can I take Bonzo out of his crate? No, he's not allowed out for another half an hour. Now, this sounds terribly regimented, but if you could just keep that regime for a couple of weeks, you will find that when Puppy is tired, you'll see Puppy heading off into his little crate and cuddling down with his toy. Or when the children are screaming or fighting, or the dinner's burning, you look around and Puppy's gone. Puppy's had enough. He's in his little crate. So it's almost like a little sanctuary for him. Yeah. And that's good.
Mm-hmm. I've never used a crate myself. Now I've just used baskets now, but I do see where people use the crate and they find it very useful. Feeding, Freda, you said you were showing them the bowl of water. Would you be a person who would suggest they're fed at certain times during the day? Like, is it morning and evening? Yeah, you're not a fan of grazing.
No, I'm not a fan of grazing. If you have more than one dog, or if you have more than one pet, you definitely cannot do grazing, because you have no idea who's eating what. Mm-hmm. So I would suggest ask the breeder or the rescue what he's eating, and try and get some of that. Now, that doesn't mean you have to keep him on it forever, but there are so many good proprietary dog foods out there. I don't really recommend own brand dog food. I would prefer you bought a proper, like a researched dog food. That can lead to a lot of different problems with the dog later. But you let's say you've got a proprietary puppy food, average price or whatever. So say the breeder was using that. So you have a bag of that. So when you get him home, he probably won't eat for the first couple of days. He might need for the first day. But I wouldn't worry about that. And don't start giving him other foods. Don't start giving him tins and chicken, because again, you're setting down rules that it's very hard to. Now, it's nothing wrong with giving your dog a piece of chicken or a bit of tuna an odd time. Or a little bit of leftover spaghetti bolognese. Now, a lot of people don't recommend that, but I don't see anything wrong with that. But that's not his main diet. His diet is the kibble, the dog nuts, the dog food.
Yeah, and you're saying like dry food as opposed to wet food. That's
absolutely. Wet food is very high in salt and a lot of stuff that dogs don't need, and they end up with, soft motion that's very hard to clean up, skin problems. Now, there are some very good tinned foods on the market, really high end, and if you're prepared to pay for those, away with you. But personally, I think the nuts are far, but much better for their teeth as well. So for a puppy, he should be eating probably if he's been on soft food, which is most unusual, you might have to speak to the breeder to continue that, and then phase that out, and then put him onto the dry dog food. But I would put down a small bowl. Now I'm talking a saucer, okay, 5 or 6 nuts. Let him eat those, and then maybe in 3 or 4 hours, give him the same again. If he doesn't eat it, take it away and put it back down. A couple of hours later, and then first thing in the morning, the minute you get up. After he's been out to the toilet, give him his little food, and then take it away. If he doesn't eat it, give him half an hour. Everybody's going to make a fuss of him. The first couple of days a bit harder because he'll be so busy he nearly forget to eat. Yeah. So after he settles down and he knows the routine, and he knows that you're having your breakfast, and this is when I get my my nuts or whatever. I don't like calling them nuts because one woman once rang me and said the dog won't eat those hazelnuts that you recommended. And they're awfully expensive, so I'm going to call it kibble, but you know what I mean, the dog food.
So, but then you'll hear people saying, older people say, well, we always fed the dog from what was left over on the table. It was all put in one big bowl and it was mashed up and down it went, and it didn't do them any harm.
Yes, well, don't forget, Amanda, that the food, the dinners and lunches our parents ate, they're not what we're eating now. So there's nothing wrong with giving a dog maybe a potato and a piece of stew that's left over. A small amount. But, our parents had probably meat, veg, potato every day. But a dog shouldn't be having dolmio and avocado and corn and quinoa, and they're all the things we eat. So they're really not for dogs. They're too rich.
Okay, so where are we? We have everyone treating the dog the same. Everyone is following the rule book. But
yes.
I think there kind of does roll out, even within that, a master in the house, doesn't there? They do identify with a person, even if that person mightn't necessarily be the most there, if you know what I mean. They do kind of identify who's in charge.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah. Generally, I find that it's generally the mother in the house or the woman in the house, because now it's not always the case. Men sometimes fill this role, but generally the woman is in charge of the food for the family. Now I'm really generalizing here, now please hope I'm not offending anybody. And generally they're in charge of feeding the dog. So I've had people come in the past and they say, oh, Mary got this pup from Santi 2 years ago and he has no interest in her. And I said, well, does she ever feed him or bring him for a walk? Oh no, sure, I do all that. Well, how does the dog know he belongs to Mary? So generally, if you want this dog to love everybody equally, let them all share the tasks. Mm-hmm. But mostly, everybody wants to do it for the first couple of weeks. But it's like everything else, eventually, it's the mother or the woman, I'll say, in the house that ends up doing it. Or the person that's at home most. I have some fabulous teenage owners who have completely charge of the dog, as in brushing, feeding, walking, everything. And those kids have been doing that for 4 or 5 years. And some of them have done that for the family dog. And now years later, they're coming to me with their own dog as an adult.
Yeah.
But, it's just that it generally is the person that is, some dogs love men. Some breeds of dogs love men. Labradors love men. German Shepherds love men. Maybe it's just the bigger dog thing. I don't know. But some dogs seem to just attach more to men than they do to women. And then sometimes in the house, it's the man has chosen to get the dog. He does everything with the dog. He walks the dog, he feeds the dog. So that dog, he brings the dog to the vet. So that dog identifies more with that person. But generally, I find it tends to be the person that's at home more and does more with the dog.
Okay, so minding the dog, Freda, as you said, those teenagers who are brushing the dog and cleaning the dog, there's an awful lot that goes on. It's not just a matter of feeding the dog and walking the dog. There's so much more that goes on without even getting fancy with the word grooming. It's just basic.
Yes, no, I absolutely agree. Just general maintenance of the dog. So first of all, obviously the puppy has to get vaccinated. If he's come from most breeders, puppy farmers, backyard, reputable breeders, registered breeders, or a rescue, he's probably going to have had his first vaccination. If you're told that, get evidence. You get a little vaccination card. So if he says he's vaccinated, it's included in your price. So can I see the evidence, please? So you take the puppy and the card to your own vet, and they will continue with the vaccination course. So it's usually, 6, 8, and 12 weeks. They get vaccinated against, I think it's 7 different diseases now, including kennel cough. And you might say he doesn't need that unless he's going to a kennel, but he does, because if he's in the town, he's meeting dogs every 5 minutes when he's out for walks, and it's transmitted from the nose. So it's a bit like the coronavirus. It's nasally transmitted. So he's sniffing around other dogs, he can get the kennel cough. So they need to be vaccinated against everything, really. And that's boosted every year, every 12 months. Generally, the vets send out a reminder. So that's vaccinations. They also need to be wormed. Again, the breeder will worm them when, they normally start with a liquid wormer when they're about 3 weeks. The mother will have been wormed, ideally, and some of that prevention will have passed on in the uterus to the puppies. But once they're born, really, they need to start being wormed. So they need to be wormed when they're a liquid wormer. Usually the breeder will give them around 3-6 weeks, maybe just before they leave at 9 or 10 weeks. And then you need to know about that and get the name of it. And your own vet will advise then. So normally it's about every 2 or 3 weeks until they're about 4 months old. And even if you see no evidence of worms, you must continue to worm them, especially if you're in a built-up area and there are other dogs around. But even at that, they still need to be wormed, because they do pick up things out in the garden, and it's prevention rather than a cure. And then from 6 months to a year, they need to be wormed 3 times a year. So what I recommend is you get the worming tablets in the vet, not the pet shop, not in a supermarket. You do see worm tablets often in various stores, but I personally would only ever buy it in the vets. You can also buy them online, I believe. I've never tried it, but the vets, I would always recommend it. It's the same price. So what I recommend is when you worm the dog, you do it first thing in the morning with a small amount of food. And then a couple of hours later, give them their full meal, because sometimes they will just throw the whole thing back up if you've given them a big meal with the worm tablet. It just makes them nauseous. So I would just give them a small amount of food with the tablet. Try and do it on a day that you're home, because you can keep an eye then. If they want to get sick, they can be put out in the yard or whatever. And then when you've done it, don't bother writing it on the calendar or in your phone, because once today is gone, that's gone. So go ahead on your phone or whatever system you use, your diary, your calendar, go ahead 3 or 4 months and mark it down. And sometimes you get little stickers with the wormer, put that on the calendar. So when it's coming up to that time, you know in your mind, oh yeah, it's time now for Teddy to get his worm tablet. So that's worming. And they will need, so it depends. A lot of the modern dogs have these long floppy ears, and a lot of those cockapoos and things. So they will need ear cleaning. It's no harm just to look in the dog's ear and see, is it black? Is it waxy? Is he rubbing his head on the ground, scratching at his ears? That's generally a sign. The kind of ear mites or just plain wax, that can be cleaned out with the vet. The groomer also does it. If you're getting the dog groomed, it's usually a routine that is included in the grooming setup. Ears, nails, they'll probably need their nails clipped. If they're walking out in the town, the nails usually, they don't actually wear down. If you get them trimmed and then you walk on hard surfaces, they will stay down, but it won't shorten them by walking. And puppies need their nails clipped. The vet usually does the first vaccination. Puppies have big long nails for kneading down the milk. When they're feeding off the mother, they pull the milk down with their little nails, and that stimulates the breast of the bitch. So they need to be trimmed, because otherwise, every time they go near a child and they start, the child saying, "Oh, he's hurting me." So just trim off those little sharp edges. The vet will do it. Don't try and do it yourself. Then the groomer does it, or the vet will do it. And then they have these little dew claws, little like our thumb, that doesn't touch the ground. So that often curls around. Sometimes I see them and they're curled right back into the pad. That must be so painful. So they need to be trimmed by the vet. Some dogs don't have that problem, but it's often worse on dogs with hairy feet because the owners can't see the nails. Then the other thing is dental. So if they're eating a good quality dog nuts, they generally don't need to have their teeth clean, but some breeds just have softer teeth than others. Yorkies, Poms, Chihuahuas, they tend to have just, I don't know why, I'm sure nobody knows, but just seem to get more dental problems. So you need to keep an eye on that. Sorry?
Are you talking a toothbrush?
You can brush a dog's teeth, yes. Personally, I never have. Both of mine have good teeth. But if you don't feed your dog an awful lot of what I call rubbish, if you don't give your dog biscuits and sweets and things, generally they don't need their teeth brushed. I mean, you can do it if you want, but I mean, everybody does it a few times. I mean, how many of us have 100 items that we bought and promised to use and never did? So just be conscious of that, you know. Don't make too many promises that you can't keep. But you can get a lot of proprietary chews and things for taking off tartar or preventing tartar. Excuse me. So I would just keep an eye on those. A lot of them tend to be quite high in sugar. And even if it says 1 per dog and it's that length and your dog is that length, break it in 2. Give him half. Give him another half in a week. He doesn't need that every day. He doesn't need that regularly. Just maybe if you're going out for an hour or you're going to do some work and you're not going to be with him and you want us to settle him down, just give him something to chew, but it doesn't have to be, you can give him a toy to chew for his teeth. You can get like they're called, I think they're called nylon, and like nylon. It's that's actually the brand name. It's like a synthetic bone. And mine actually used to love that when they're small. They chew on that. That's really good. And it's also good for it's like a teether for a child. It's good for like their dental formation and their jaw formation. Makes them strong. Okay, and brushing then, of course, as well.
Famous quote, Freda. How often should you brush your dog?
Okay, well, again, how long is a piece of string? It depends on the dog. Short-haired dogs, I would definitely recommend brushing once a week. Just once a week. You can actually get those mitts for short-haired dog. It's like a glove with a ruckety, and that's really good. Just rub them all down, and they really like it. And again, it's like a little massage for them. Now, other dogs, like let's say German Shepherds, Retrievers, dogs that shed plenty, the more you brush them, the less hair will be on your carpet. So take them out into the garden from day one. Maybe I would probably brush my German Shepherd probably once every 2 weeks, but once a week would be better. So let's say once a week. Get the proper brush for the size. Ask the girl in the pet shop or the person in the pet shop. When you look online, it's very difficult because it's very hard to know exactly what you're getting until you have it in your hand. So don't be afraid to ring a groomer or the veterinary nurse or the vet or the person in the pet shop. Ask advice. Like, those people are dying to give you advice. It doesn't mean you have to buy something off them. They're quite happy because it means that the dog is in a better place. Yeah. So I would take them out to the garden, get them used to brushing. 10 minutes is loads. If the dog has had enough, let the dog go, start again tomorrow. If you haven't done the full 10 minutes, but you decide when the dog goes. So if the dog jumps up and runs away against your wishes, you call him back, you sit him down, count to 5 and do 5 more strokes. And then you decide when it's over. Okay. Not the dog. Even that, you're just making a point there, but that's brushing is another discipline. Some dogs love it. Most dogs tolerate it, and some absolutely hate it.
Mine run. You see the drawer opening with the brush in it.
Yes. But you see, Amanda, the thing is, if you do and I'll get onto the non-shedding, as they call them, breeds in a minute. But if you do the dog regularly, there are no knots there. Yeah, if there are no knots there, it doesn't hurt. That's the ideal situation. Yeah. So then there are these other dogs which are being bred now in the last few years. They're mixed breeds. So they're a shedding dog crossed with a non-shedding dog. For example, a Cocker Spaniel and a Poodle. They're called Cockapoos. The Bichon crossed with a Cavalier. I can't even remember what they're called. Cavachon, Cavapoo, Maltipoo. There's dozens of them, but the selling point for them is, apart from they look like teddy bears and all that, they don't shed, in inverted commas. They must shed. They have to shed or they would be dead. So they don't shed on the floor, but they shed into their own coat. So you don't see a Bichon, or not a Bichon, but a Cavachon that looks the same for 6 months. No, his coat gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and thicker and thicker. So those dogs have to be brushed. You can, as I say, you can hoover or you can brush the dog. You can hoover the carpet or brush the dog. You're still doing something. So basically those dogs need to be brushed. I say every day. You can take Christmas Day off, but that's not feasible. That's not going to happen. So if you can brush your dog, the non-shedding, I'm going to call them that, although I don't agree with that term, but then people know what I'm talking about. If you can brush that dog 3 times a week, you are doing really well. What I recommend is pick the time. Say, I always brush the dog on a Monday when I come home from the gym. I always brush the dog on a Wednesday as soon as the kids have their homework finished. Or I always brush the dog after Coronation Street or whatever. Don't say, I must brush him today. tomorrow. You know, it's like cleaning the car. You never do it. 2 weeks go by. So if you brush your dog, he won't have any knots. When you take him to the groomer, she won't have to shave him off unless you want that done. You can pick any style you want if you have brushed your dog.
And tell me,
All
Freda,
over, not just the back.
when you're brushing the dog, should that be a one-person situation rather than, say, if children? Now, everyone holding a tail and holding a leg, and everyone is involved, or should it just be a calm situation that you're just getting on with? It's not.
Yes, I would suggest a calm situation. If the children want to get involved, they could possibly take it in turns. So today, you know, Amanda holds the head and I brush. Tomorrow, Tom holds the head and I brush, or whatever. And then if they're a little older, I hold the head and you brush for 5 minutes. So, you know, and when you're working on the dog, it's not a game. So he doesn't take the brush in his mouth, or, you know, you're not like, oh, you're such a good boy. It's calm, say his name, keep it calm. Just do as much as he can tolerate. You know what I mean? I don't want it to be cruel. I want it to be that the dog doesn't mind getting brushed, because a bit of attention. And then when it's finished, when the brushing is finished, bring him outside and kick the football. Don't be giving him food for a reward. He doesn't need it. He just gets fat. Bring him out and pick the ball, or throw his toy for him for 5 minutes. So you're such a good boy for keeping quiet for 5 minutes. Now we're going to have a big game or a big cuddle, you know. And dogs really do, they do react to that.
And they do need cuddles. Freda, when you're taking a dog out on a lead, okay, so you have your puppy lead train. I presume you probably do that in your garden. Would you do that in a small environment when you're first trying to get the dog used to the pressure of a lead?
Yeah, first of all, I'd say the collar. Generally, once they're born, breeders generally identify them with different collars, maybe with little some kind of permanent marker or something on the collars. So that'll stay at home. That'll stay with the breeder. So get a little collar, cloth collar, soft collar, not a leather. You can get a leather when he's older, maybe, but they can get beautiful little collars now. You throw them in the washing machine. So one of them. Keep an eye on that, because he's growing. So that needs to be made a little bit bigger. So don't buy a huge one that he grows into. I mean, they're only about €3 or €4. So buy a little one and then get a bigger one next year or whatever, or next month when he's a bit bigger. So he's wearing that. Now you'll see him the first few weeks, oh, I don't like this, and it'll be rattling, but eventually that'll just stop. Or when you're rubbing him and cuddling him in your arms and petting him, just give that a little scratch there around. Just, oh, is that hurting? Is that annoying a bit? And just give him a little bit of relief. Eventually he'll just forget about that. So the lead then, yeah, the lead training can be quite, I won't say difficult, but it does take time. There are some brilliant dog training classes around, not expensive, basically for teaching your dog to walk on a lead, come back when called. That's called recall. That is so important. You know, to sit and stay and wait to get his lead on, not to be like running around the house like a wild thing every time he sees you getting your shoes or whatever. Well, that's fun too, but can get a bit tiresome, especially if you've just been out in a puddle or something, you know. So now puppies are going to behave like that, and that's good. But you know, you don't want a 5-year-old dog with no discipline. And the other thing which I find endless is what they call heedless or unnecessary barking. So barking for nothing. Yeah. No, well, when you have more than one dog, you will always have barking. But a dog that just barks every time you open the fridge or every time the phone rings, like those are not alarmist situations. So they need to bark to tell you that something has happened, or that there's something wrong, or there's somebody here. So barking should be, you know, it's not for every 5 seconds. So anyway, go back to the lead. So generally, what I was always taught, although there's a lot of more modern thinking of what I learned, but generally the old ways can work too. Get a little lead, just a small little cheap lead in the pet shop, not a flexi lead, which is the one that rolls in and out. Not that, okay? You're starting off. You can use a piece of a clothesline if you want, doesn't matter. And clip it onto the dog's collar, right? Now, this is your lead. It's fine. It's no harm. It's just your lead. Look, it's your lead. Don't let him take it in his mouth or bite it, ever, not from day one. Clip it on his lead and just leave it on the ground, and then just throw his ball. He'll run along with the lead behind him. He's thinking, what's that? What's that? But you say, where's your ball? Where's your ball? You know, or whatever, his fluffy toy or whatever, and then pick him up 2 minutes later, give him a cuddle. It's your lead, it's your lead. Now then take it off, put it away. Keep it in the same place is a good plan. So hang it up behind the door, wherever it's going to live, put it there. Don't leave it on the couch. He will run over, he will take it and he will eat it. That's the end of that horrible thing. Then you have to go and get another one. And now he's in charge of the lead. Do you know what I mean? So you're in charge of the lead. So you hang it up high where he can't get it. So it's not a toy again. It's not like, you're going out for a walk. No, you're not. It's not that, right? It's for this, for the moment. Do that again tomorrow and the next day. And then the next day, take the lead in your hand and bring him with you. So there's your toy. Oh, I have the lead now, right? So do that 3 or 4 times around the kitchen and then take it out to the garden. So ideally, the dog should always go with you. So you're walking forward, the dog's walking forward. Walks for puppies definitely around the garden for a few weeks until he gets used to the lead. Stop when he wants to stop. When he wants to have a sniff, stop. It's his walk, it's not yours. Let him have a sniff. He probably won't be marking yet. He's too small. We're saying he, but it could be a she. She's mark as well. So let him just have a little piddle or whatever he wants and walk along and then walk around a few times. Bring him in, take the lead off, or take the lead off outside and let him run around for a few minutes if you want. Do that again for a few times. Now, he's not to leave the garden until he's fully vaccinated. So by this time, he's probably going to be about 12 weeks. So he's getting up there. He's been with you probably 3 to 4 weeks. So he's getting a little bit of confidence. So put the lead on him up and down the footpath or the road outside your house 3 or 4 times. Do that again. Like dogs need very short walks initially. They don't need big long. You bring them out twice a day if you want. I see people walking around, around the block there in Trim with tiny puppies. Tiny puppies have tiny growth plates. Tiny puppies have tiny hips, tiny elbows. They cannot walk long journeys. You're absolutely destroying their little growth plates. So give them small walks regularly. When they're old enough, you can walk them to Kerry if you want, but give them time to actually develop the skills of walking.
Absolutely. Okay, can I kind of diversify a little bit? The Covert dog. Okay. So
yes.
Most people used to worry about when they would get a dog was that they wouldn't be able to spend enough time with the dog, that the dog would be sitting in the garden most of the day, etc., and didn't have enough company. Now we're in the reverse, where we have most people at the moment at home and for the foreseeable, and people are actually trying to work. So when you would have been home before, you were just doing your domestic chores. Okay, you weren't trying to work as well. So your time in the house was nearly their time, if you know what I mean.
Yes, no, I'll be with you.
You do a Zoom call this morning and someone else is in another room or something, and your dog says, oh, she's home. Right, that's it. And they're at your leg and they're pulling at you and whatever. What do you think? No, I know
well, this is, sorry.
I know you're going to say no.
No, actually, I realize everything I'm saying sounds terribly strict, but I mean, I will say before I answer your question that it is also so important that the dog is part of the family. Like when all the crating and lead training and everything is done, definitely on your lap, definitely playing the game of football or whatever, like the really nice happy times, they are just so important, especially with a puppy. A puppy needs to build confidence, so you need to give him plenty of time. Keep saying his name. That's the other thing. Every time you see him, John or Mick or Tony, whatever the dog's name is, keep saying it. Eventually he'll get the idea that is him. Say it when you're putting down his food. There's your food, Bonzo. There's your water, Bonzo. Anyway, what you said about the Covert dog. Yeah, okay. So now the first thing is, if the dog was an existing dog, when you went out to work, most dogs will keep the same routine. So let's say, for example, if you were going out to work at 9 a.m. in the morning and your routine was that you got up at 7:30 and you brought your dog out for a walk, even just for 20 minutes or whatever, and you brought it back and you fed him and he went into his basket in the utility room, and then you let him out for a quick pee at 5 to 9 and you were gone. So I would keep that. I would continue that routine. I would get up in the morning. If you don't walk them, let them out, for their piddle, bring them in, feed them, let them have their time with you when you're having your breakfast or putting on a wash or whatever, and then let them out for their piddle, put them into the utility room, into their crate. If they like to lie on the sofa, and I'll talk about that in a minute, let them into the living room, onto their, their throw on the sofa or whatever. Close the door. You go into your own quarters where you do your office, your kitchen, close the door. Ideally, if the dog's bed is in the kitchen all day, maybe you could work in the living room or vice versa. But I would close the dog into wherever he lived when you were at work. If he had the full run of the house, for security, you might need to change that or close yourself into a room. But I would try and keep, and then at lunchtime or coffee time, yeah, take him, let him be with you. Let him, you know, if you're looking at Facebook or reading the paper when you're having your coffee break or whatever you're doing on the phone to your mum, you know, have him on your lap or have a cuddle, or go outside, run him around the garden, kick his ball or whatever for 5 minutes. My dog loves to play with the hose. You know, I throw the hose, I throw the water up and she jumps up and catches it. Whatever you do for the 5 minutes, do that again at lunchtime. If you have an hour, you might consider it a short walk, even just up the road or whatever. And then in the afternoon, back into his quarters. So, if you don't want him on your lap all the time, you have to make that division. If it's a puppy and he's only ever known you all there, you might have to be a little bit strict. I'm not going to say cruel, because it's for his own good in the long run. It sounds cruel, but you might have to put him into the crate, or you might have to put him in the utility room. Or, you know, if it's a nice sunny day and you have a nice garden and he has a little kennel out there, he can be out in the garden during the day. Once it's not lashing down from the heavens, once he has a shelter, somewhere to go. Now, don't put out his toys, because 9 out of 10 dogs will not run around the garden with their own toys. That they might, but generally they need interaction with toys, you know, a tug toy or a ball or something, unless it's 2 dogs, and then they'll play together maybe. But I would just leave him out there, maybe with one of those chewy toys or the squeaky things. You know, sometimes the teeth things that will go with those. Just check out on him, but you don't have to be constantly looking at him and giving him attention. Like, he's a dog. He's more or less self-contained. He's a lot going on that you don't know about. So, you know, he knows that, you know, that Molly next door isn't out yet, but she'll be out at 11. You know, their dog, and they'll sniff each other through the fence, and you know, they get on with their own lives as well. So don't make him into a needy dog, or you will regret that.
Tell me, Freda, there's only a question about asking, what about dressing your dog with clothes for dogs? Yes.
Well, I'll give my personal opinion first. I am not a fan of clothes for dogs. Dogs have coats. They have their own coat. They have their own hair. Now, having said that, a lot of those non-shed dogs that I get in haven't been brushed or have a coat that mats incredibly easy, and the Lord in heaven couldn't keep it in good order, and they have to be shaved down, clipped down to like, as I say, peeled like an orange. They have to have that done for their own good, because you cannot take out those knots. You can only prevent them from happening. And there's nothing wrong with that dog getting a coat, because that dog has had like a sheep's fleece on him, and that's been growing on him maybe for 3 or 4, 5, 6 months. That dog is actually going to feel the cold because he has no hair. Now, we created these dogs ourselves, so we have to look after them. We have to look after the situations those dogs find themselves in. So they're not actually, you know, they don't have that long-term breeding that other dogs have with thick coats or whatever. Now, you might say a Labrador has no coat, but he has his own type of coat. He has his own type of thermal wear. So, so there's nothing wrong with putting a coat on that dog. When you're bringing him out, they shouldn't wear clothes in the house. Is really bad for their skin, really bad for their coat. Their skin needs to breathe. It can breathe through the hair, so it needs to breathe properly. So yes, if you think he might be cold, but as the hair starts to come back, I wouldn't be putting a coat on him. But the other thing I do see a lot of people with their dogs, and actually I've nothing against this. It's almost like a little raincoat that you put on your dog. And if you have a very small dog, and the streets and roads are very dirty at the moment, so it means when and it zips here. Obviously there's a place for them to go to the toilet, but some of them actually come down to about here on the dog's legs. So if you have a nice white fluffy dog, it means when you bring them home, you can just rinse off the paws, take off that, and your carpet or whatever isn't covered with muck. Especially if you live in an apartment, or if you're quite house proud and you don't want that in your house, or even in your car. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's only for when he's out. So instantly it's taken off. Now, you see dogs with hoods up and mittens and little things on their feet. Nothing on their feet, please. They're dogs. They need to touch the ground, putting fancy gear on dogs is all about us. It's not about the dog. Oh, she loves it. She feels so smart in it. No, she doesn't. She doesn't love it. She might tolerate it for you because she loves you. But no, I know that sounds terribly practical, but no, they don't need those dungarees.
Ours are small and close to the ground, as you say. And so if they're walking in a field, now at the moment it's quite mucky, and so if they didn't have something on them, they would be filthy.
Absolutely.
This kind of go. So with the minute they come in the door, then I take them off, throw those in the machine, and they're fine. You know.
Yeah, they're a godsend from that point of view, especially if your dog, like the Westies, they have fringes.
Yeah, and then so you might end up sort of saying, oh, the weather is so awful, I'm not bringing them out. Well, it's not raining, but it's mucky, and I don't want them mucky. So
and that's not fair on them.
It's not fair. So it's kind of a compromise. But
I have no problem with that. I absolutely agree with that.
Okay, so a situation where I was talking to a few people before I was talking to you about things that they might like to know. So one of them was, if you had an elderly, unwell dog, and you've always had dogs all through your life and whatever else, and you've got children in the house, and everyone is sad because Bonzo isn't well. The idea of getting another dog, do you think so that it will make the passage for the children, shall we say, in the house that a little bit easier? Or do you think it's unfair on both the older dog and the puppy?
Yeah, I personally, I think the latter. Now, it depends how elderly and infirm and unwell the older dog is. I feel that the older dog, give it its time. Like give it those last few months. Give it a bit of, or just let it live out in comfort. Because a puppy, what does a puppy think? A puppy bounds in the house. Oh, there's another puppy. Grab its ear, grab its tail. The old dog is saying, would you leave me alone? So unless you're an incredibly well experienced dog owner, and you're more than capable, and I have had I know some people who have managed this quite successfully. You're more than capable of keeping the dogs in separate areas, and you have that. And yes, that's the old dog lives in the utility room, and she loves to go in there. And the small dog, the new dog, is in that little under the stairs or whatever, So unless you can really keep that, I would personally feel that let the old dog have its time. Let him live out the last bit. Possibly look up new pups if you want, but don't say anything to the older dog. Don't ask his advice. Look up new pups. Decide what you want. Think about what you might be getting. Book a pup if you want, but you don't know when the other dog is going to expire. So personally, I wouldn't be getting. Now I have 2 dogs, but one was only like 4, and I got the second dog, so that's different. But once they go past a certain age, they like their own space, they like their own time. Old dogs have, they might have a bit of a creaky arthritis that's hurting them. Maybe their digestion isn't the best. Maybe they need to get out more. Maybe they want to be the first one out the door in the mornings because this is their house, and they don't want a little puppy pushing past them and always having to be first. And
you mentioned there, I have 4 dogs, but and there was quite an age gap between them. So I have 14, 10, 6, and 2. But I found that with the younger puppies coming in, it actually brought a little bit of life back to the house.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say. That was my next thing. I was going to say, on a positive note, I have known people with elderly dogs that got a younger dog. But you see, it's different for you, Amanda, because you just didn't have the 12 or 14-year-old and get the 2-year-old. Your older dog was always used, and she was younger when the middle-aged dogs were introduced.
Absolutely, yes.
And she's always lived in a house of dogs. Yeah. So now they say, and most people think this is hilarious, that the senior bitch in the oldest bitch in the house is the boss. Now, some people say that's the same with humans.
I think it's true, though. I from my own experience in this house.
Yes. So, the male might go around piddling on things and waving his tail in the air. But guess who's in charge? It's the bitch, So
absolutely, I would definitely think that. But it has been a nice dynamic in the house to have the younger dog. But then again, my older dog isn't sick, so therefore she's just slow.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And you're very conscious of that. They're very conscious of the different ages.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, that most people would be like, you see people there and they have an old retriever and then maybe a retriever of about a year old. And you could see husband and wife walking. One has the pup bounding along because a year-old is still a pup, and the other has the older one taking their time.
Yeah.
Or, you know, the older dog might just lie in the yard. He mightn't want to go for a walk. So you just leave him there. He doesn't have to go. So as I said, there are ways of working around that. And I think most people will, it's just to be aware of both dogs' needs, because as you said, it can be a bit unfair on the younger puppy as well. Like, stop that, leave him alone, you know, but I'm only playing, you know, so you just need to be conscious. If you're conscious of it, then usually it's successful. And I would say most of what we're talked about also applies to cats, although we haven't really spoken about cats, but most, apart from the fact that they're much more independent, don't need to go for walks and all that, but, you know, older cats, younger cats, feeding, rules. It's hard to make cats have rules, but a closed door will keep out a cat, you know, so most things do apply to, you know, to either pet.
Yeah, no, we did focus on the dogs today, I suppose, because of the COVID or whatever, because it's so, obviously, and because
absolutely,
and it's your prime area of expertise, as we know, Freda.
Yes, yeah. Well, I veterinary nurse, you do all small animals, you know, guinea pigs, mice, all those things as well. So,
and so just that you mentioned, we're going to finish up shortly, but a veterinary nurse. So, where did you go to college, or how did you do that? How do you become a veterinary nurse?
Well, when this is when I started. I left school in 1980, a lifetime ago, and I went to the vocational school in Cavan, and we had a fantastic career guidance teacher there, Mr. McLaughlin. He was so ahead of his time. I now know that. I mean, we didn't really appreciate him, but he was so ahead of his time. And he used to take, like every few months, he'd take everybody into his little office and you'd have a chat of what you might like to do right from the get-go. Like, he was gearing you up for different things. Now, not many people went to university, as you can imagine, in those days. So I started in that school in 1975. So when I was in his office, I thought I wanted to do something sciencey. So there was a science course in Dundalk, which I thought I was going to go to. And then I was in his office one day and I just saw a whole load of leaflets. It used to be leaflets for different courses. Yeah. And I saw it just lying on the ground, and it said veterinary nurse. And I thought, that sounds interesting. So I picked it up and I said, can I take this? Yeah. So I brought it home. And then, of course, from that minute on, that's what I was going to be. But you couldn't actually train to be a veterinary nurse in Ireland. You could work in a veterinary practice, an approved veterinary practice in Ireland. And then you went to lectures at night in Kevin Street, or DIT as it is now, and in the veterinary college twice a week. And then you had to go to England to do your exams, sadly. So you did a practical book all the way through. So you worked like in a vets, which I did in Dublin. And then every task you achieved, you know, the vet went through it and signed it. And then you submitted that practical book for your exams. And then you had to go to England to do the written initially and the practical. And then they moved the written to the veterinary college in Dublin. So you could do the written there. If you passed that, you went to England to do the practical. So when I passed out of first year, I was only one of two people in the whole of the Republic of Ireland that passed the exams. Because there was only about 10 people on the whole course. And they said, no, they weren't going to bother running the second year course because it wasn't worth doing it for two people. So I had to do most of the second year course on my own. So I had to send to foils in London. If there's no internet, send to foils in London for books. Got them back. My sister helped me with that. And eventually they did get some lectures in the veterinary college, and we went to those. And then I had to go to Liverpool that year, to Liverpool Veterinary University, Department of Veterinary Medicine, to do the second year exams. So then I worked in Dublin for a few years after that. And then I went to work in England, because the nurses in England, you see, they used to go out on block release to their agricultural colleges, because it was an English course. It was much better supported in England. But, you know, it's a great profession. It's totally different now. It's a degree now. For the last few years, it's been a degree. So the points are very high. And I think it's either 3 or 4 years, and you go to Athlone, Dundalk, or to UCD. Wow. So it's a degree now.
But at least it's local.
Yeah, it's local. Yeah. You still have to go on the block release to the vet. So it still has that practical element. Mm-hmm. Because when I went to work in England, I mean, my knowledge was completely different from a lot of the nurses who had gone to the college, because they would have gone to lectures, you know, they would have done like practical bandaging demonstrations, whereas mine was all in the surgery on dogs that were actually sick, actually in road traffic accidents, rather than, you know, like a model dog.
Yeah.
So my knowledge, I would say actually it was much more, I was way more advanced. And my first job, I'm sure I've ever told you this, but my first job in England was for the vets to the Queen.
Told me this, tell us.
Yes,
Yeah,
my first job ever. I mean, I was a bag of nerves. But, you know, once I realized that I knew just as much as all the other nurses, and in some cases way more, I was fine. But I worked as a locum in England. So I worked in loads of different practices, which was great, you know, because you were moving around all different places, and most of them had accommodation. So you would live in the flat upstairs with the other nurses. So, I mean, the fun was fantastic. And then if an animal was really ill, we'd always bring them up to the flat, you know, put them on the sofa or whatever, on the drip, so we'd be able to keep an eye on them. But yeah, no, it was great, I have to say. So, but when I came back here, I worked in Navan for a while in the vets. I worked in Drogheda, and then I worked in a boy veterinary practice for a while. And then when I had the children, it just wasn't practical. So with, you know, with times of creches and all that, because obviously the vets work isn't 9 to 5 Monday to Friday. So I had done a grooming course some years before, but I wasn't really that keen on it. But I just did it once when I couldn't get a job, just to fill in the time. So I thought, I was thinking, what could I do? I could do kennels, but then I'd be always busy at Christmas when the kids are off. So I thought, maybe I'll try my hand at the grooming. So I sent off and got some grooming tools, and just took off from there. I used to do it in the back bedroom, and then I had a little shed up the yard, and then kind of the Celtic Tiger came, and everybody started getting dogs and wanting their dogs groomed, and suddenly it was just a business, you know.
But it is, and I mean, you can see, I know you sort of said it a couple of times there, you didn't want to come across as tough when you're saying, well, the puppy can't do this and the puppy can't do that. But, you know, the whole thing is that if you don't set down the boundaries for the puppy,
yes,
you're making things awkward for the puppy. Because
for the puppy, exactly, Amanda.
It's not
because that puppy is going to be a dog, you know, an adult.
You know, and when you are trying, and like we're all at home, there's more people than ever in our homes at the moment. And you've dogs running around. I suppose I have 3 or 4, but you know, and when the doorbell goes or the phone rings or there's something happening or trying to do dinner and something's, you need to have a discipline on the dog. It's only fair, you know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So what can I say? It has been a pure joy having.
We could talk all day.
Yeah, we could talk all day.
One more thing I meant to say was that if people are thinking of getting a dog or have any problems, you know, behavioral questions or whatever, and there's loads of stuff on the internet. I know that, but I also know that the libraries are brilliant, and they have pet books coming out their ears. So, you know, when you go on the internet and you Google a problem, you'll get an awful lot of people's opinions, but not necessarily facts. Whereas a lot of when you actually go and get a behavior book, yes, it's written by a person, I know that, but you can refer back to it. You know, you can think, does that suit my dog? You can keep the book for a month. You can, you know, you can photocopy it over. I think you actually have a much more balanced view looking at a book for a dog. You get more out of it, and they're generally written by dog experts, whereas everybody's opinion is on the internet, good, bad, and indifferent. Ads, I mean, you get sidetracked looking at coats for dogs when you're really want to know how to toilet train your dog, which we never actually talked about, but never mind that. But the other thing is
another day.
Yeah, another day. So like, inform yourself, and don't forget that your dog is an individual. So, you know, the things that suits Mrs.'s dog next door, well, they mightn't be quite right for your dog, but don't be afraid to ask for advice. That's really, really important.
When you stole my little wrap-up line there, where I was going to suggest that people would go along to the libraries, but of course, I'm not working for the library, but I know you're an avid library user. But yeah, we do have all of that material in the libraries and whatever, and of course, membership is free. But listen, it has been absolutely wonderful talking to you, Freda, this morning, and your love and passion for the lucky dogs that you groom, and mine are some of those, comes out. And I think the fact that you are a veterinary nurse as well, many a time you've pointed out things to me about the dog. It's not just about getting a haircut. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think it's more of a holistic approach.
Yeah, it is a holistic approach. It's, you know, I didn't like that, or her eye wasn't literally noticed. And sometimes you're thinking, I didn't even know that. I didn't even see that. But it's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And we will talk to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Amanda. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.